speakers for today's talk. Uh, our chief guests have not joined yet because they are busy in some work. They will join shortly. So without wasting any more time, I'm going to introduce for chairpersons for the second topic, which is Dr. Madhu Sharda Madam. Dr. Madhu Sharda Ma'am is a infertility specialist at Krishna Heart Care and Maternity Center. She is a senior gynecologist from Jaunpur. And the second chairperson is Dr. Shelly Nigam. She is a senior and infertility specialist and obstetrician and gynecologist at Himani Hospital, Director Himani Hospital. So I welcome you both. And I request Dr. Madhu Sharda Madam to please introduce our speaker, Dr. Ishita Avasthi Ma'am.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm now introducing none other than Dr. Ishita Avasthi. She is very familiar to me and she's by heart very good, and we have been together in many conferences. She is MD from IPG Jipmer Kolkata, IPG Kolkata, Director Upahar Nursing Home Varanasi. She is laparoscopic surgeon and infertility specialist, trained in ultrasonography and special interest in arterial and uterus conserving surgery. Dr. Ishita, a very warm welcome to you on this platform. Now I want to request to start your topic.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. And it is so nice to see such a familiar face, I think after almost a year, if I'm right. Yes, and thanks to this webinar, at least we can meet virtually, if so. Yeah. And it is an honor and a real pleasure to come across to you. Basically, I am now going to screen share. Can I screen share?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, we can do that. Yes.
Yeah. So, slides can you move? I think there's some problem.
Is there any issue, ma'am?
Yeah, I think. Okay. I'm just starting.
Okay.
Yes. Actually, I thank. Can you see my slides, please?
No, we cannot see it, ma'am. Please.
Okay. Okay. Just a second. I think there's some problem with screen share, and I don't.
Ma'am, just close all other background applications if there are any.
I've closed everything. Yes.
Okay.
Screen share.
Yes, ma'am, we can see it.
Okay. Yes, now you can see?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So I thank Mr. Pankaj Sahu and the Jaunpur Obstetrics Society, which is in fact a very, very active society. I've been there a couple of times, and it's always been a very warm welcome and meeting very warm people over there for having this webinar. And basically, I am a very, very lazy person. So when my friend Anju and Dr. Pankaj told me to do something with this on this some topic regarding an ultrasound, so I thought, why not, since Dr. Anju was already dealing with 11 to 13 week scan, so I thought I will put my presentation to something before 11 to 13 weeks. So mine is a very simple topic, basically, if you see it, but it is something that we deal in day-to-day life. And coming to a diagnosis in what we are dealing with in a first trimester bleeding actually has a lot of impact on how you are going to treat the patient and have a good obstetric outcome okay, we cannot have an 100% outcome, but at least 95%, and at least we have tried doing the right thing. Rest is God's will. So ideal outcome of any pregnancy is this kind of baby, a healthy, happy baby. And when you have some bad obstetric outcome at any stage, maybe if you missed, you somehow managed to have a cross first trimester and second trimester, but if the baby is IUGR or having some sort of problem and lands up in NICU for reasons other than that happening during labor, then it's really traumatic for the family. So half the diagnosis I think you make when you're taking history from the patient. Listen to the patient and ask few leading direct questions. And with that, you reach to come to your diagnosis by just 50% of the diagnosis reached just by talking to the patient. And secondly, this is not copied from anywhere. This is all this flow chart, and whatever I'm going to present is what I do. So you can have either a checklist or you can just do take these points and talk to this patient. Most of the time we are talking, we are saying these salient points, but somehow we don't take a note of it. So when you talk to the patient, you have to see duration of amenorrhea she is reporting in relation to the cycle length. See, many times the patient has a cycle length of just 25 days, and patient says, I am supposed to have my periods today and I'm not having it. So you think, okay, she's overdue one day, why do, maybe this is a normal period, or why we don't, why unnecessarily do a urine test today because she's supposed to have it today. But actually it is amenorrhea period day 6. So you can very well go ahead in having a pregnancy test, or in fact an beta HCG. Now it's readily available everywhere. So you, and if she's bleeding, maybe it's an early pregnancy implantation failure, and you can give a luteal support to these kind of patients and you can save that pregnancy. History of any other bleeding episode in this pregnancy. So maybe she's come to you after 2 months of amenorrhea and bleeding today, but maybe she has bled 15 days back, 10 days back, and whole pregnant, maybe whatever period of amenorrhea, there are 2-3 episodes of slight bleeding, which has been ignored. Whether card pregnancy test was done, these days almost everybody is coming with the readily available card test, and most of the time it is pregnancy. But one thing has to be noted, that many times it is a false positive test, because maybe the temperature variations happening in our area, sometimes it's very hot and pregnancy tests have not been stored in a proper manner, or they are very old, then at times you will have a false positive test. So you should always confirm a pregnancy test, preferably with a beta HCG. The color of bleeding. Now, if the bleeding is red, color and amount, I will take these 2 points together. If the bleeding is fresh blood and amount is average, then maybe we are dealing with almost a threatened or an inevitable abortion. Or if the bleeding is slightly brownish, either it could be an Appler syndrome we are dealing with, or the patient, it is already a missed conception we are dealing with. Whether conception was spontaneous or after a sterility treatment. Usually the sterility treatment, patient has an IVF or IUI, or she has been waiting for so many times and she has conceived spontaneously. You should never take these kind of pregnancies very lightly, because they can land you up with all types of problems. Now, the obstetric history, number of pregnancies she has had, number of abortions, and you should make sure number of POGs post period of gestation of each abortions, because so many times it happens that it is just 15 days, 10 days overdue, and you have already missed the pregnancy, she is already aborted, but next pregnancy you have to keep in mind that you have to make her conceive on progesterones, because actually this is the criteria of some sort of early pregnancy failure. And many times you save pregnancies by just giving a simple luteal support. And there are 2 things I have noticed in my practice, that if we have dealt with 1 or 2 embryonic, in recurrent pregnancy law especially, 1 or 2 embryonic pregnancies, usually it is the chromosomal abortions, chromosomal problem that is coming into play. And if it is an 8 weeks abortion, or an abortion after a cardiac activity has been noted and she has aborted after say 8 weeks, 6 weeks after noting the first cardiac activity on whichever mode of ultrasound, this is actually the case of Appler syndrome. So you have to start with therapies, aspirin, low molecular weight, whatever is needed in these periods. Secondly, whether the abortions were medical or surgical. Medical usually they don't lead to future placenta accreta percreta, but surgical abortions and a repeated abortion in the same pregnancy. Suppose she's needed a double curettage in the in the previous pregnancy. This is likely these kind of patients may lead up with placenta accreta or percreta in the subsequent pregnancies. Post-abortion period how was it uneventful? She had fever, whatever, because fever means that maybe she has had sepsis and this time maybe she is going to land up in some sort of problems. And whether any special blood test was done, usually patient has these days has had investigation somewhere and your problem is regarding investigation is solved. Number of pregnancies now, whether the pregnancies obstetric histories have gone beyond 24 weeks or not, and whether she has had, maybe she says ab mere दो बच्चे हैं, दोनों बच्चे ठीक हैं, but for all you know she might have had delivered the pregnancies following PPRM at 32 weeks and baby was in an ICU. So you have to, and if you are dealing with PPRM remote from term, maybe it was Appler syndrome. And that's why period of gestation of each pregnancy is important in detailed history taking, especially the obstetric. Maybe she said, "Ab mere 3 bachche hue the, and none of them are living." For all you know, you have to take detailed labor history. For all you know, it was just delayed, prolonged labor, and we are dealing with maybe not an obstetric problem pertaining to Anadi syndrome. Just it was what had happened during that labor process. So maybe next time you would like to take her for a very strict monitored labor or maybe an elective cesarean. Medical complications, whether they had complicated the pregnancies, diabetes, gestational diabetes mellitus. These days, in our PG days, we used to have 1, maybe 2 pregnancies once in a while with coming with over diabetes, like pregnancies happening in women who are already diabetic. Now diabetes is so prevalent that almost every month in my limited practice, I am dealing with 1 or 2 diabetic patients, over diabetes. And secondly, GDM has to be screened, and maybe it is a possibility that patient women who was GDM in the previous pregnancies has turned into an over diabetic. So it is quite a possibility. So that's why gestational diabetes mellitus, the history has to be taken into account. PIH. Now PIH, if she says mera blood pressure badha tha ya eclampsia hua tha, we have to ask leading questions that at what gestation she had PIH. So again, it signifies an Appler syndrome. Obstetric complications, APH, PPORM, IUGR, they all indicate towards an Appler syndrome, and you have to take, if you take previous precautions in these kind of present pregnancies with who have been complicated by APH, PPRM or IUGR, PPRM especially remote from term, then you can rest assured you will have a good outcome, because interventions has to be done preferably pre-pregnancy. But if she has landed up with you in a present pregnancy in early trimester, then interventions in form of low molecular weight heparin or aspirin can be done early and with a good obstetric outcome. History of first trimester spotting in previous pregnancies, mode of delivery, obstetric outcome, NICU and admissions. So all these have to be taken into account. Menstrual history, cycle length is very important for establishing period of gestation or any other pathology. If you're dealing with PCO, then PCO has a habit of having an abnormal follicular genesis, and then that's why you have to, she might land up with early pregnancy loss or a luteal phase deficiency. Duration and nature of flow, dysmenorrhea, dyschezia, fever and nausea. All this triad actually, the last point, dysmenorrhea, dyschezia, fever and nausea, indicates towards an endometriotic phenomena happening inside. It's not necessary that all endometriosis have to go in for IVF or IUI. Many times they just conceive. If the disease is minimal, they conceive. Or if the husband, partner and other parameters are normal in the woman, they conceive. But endometriosis is actually an immunologic phenomenon. And you have to give some immunomodulator and progesterone support in these kind of women, especially in endometriosis. Family history again, DM, diabetes, hypertension, asthma, hyper and hypothyroidism are now it is part of guidelines only that every patient has to be screened for thyroid and endometriosis and PCOS because this has an impact on how you treat the patient. Medical and surgical history, surgery for endometriosis, whether it was done or not, how extensive was the disease, how much of adityolysis was done, and whether it was just drainage or azitiolysis, at what age she had to undergo these diagnostic precautions. But because for all you know, this is the only chance she has, the present pregnancy that you are dealing with. She has conceived, but maybe if the disease is severe, this is the only chance. So you have to give your full 100% for her to have a successful outcome. Laparotomy, the site and the length of scar. This is very, very important because I have landed up in a big mess because I was told that it was a simple appendicectomy. I think we all have gone through this kind of patient. There was a scar, not on the site, McBurney's point, but midline scar, and they said it was an emergency laparotomy for a ruptured appendix. But it was actually, they had taken out the ovary and it was a severe endometriosis case and they had to do a laparotomy. And many times, believe me, even I have seen ectopics happening and the patient is not informing, maybe because of the fear of in-laws or whatever. Now, ectopic, it is very important because 15% of the ectopics have the nature of repeating itself. So, site of ectopic, nature of surgery, what was done, whether self-injectomy was done or self-ingostomy was done, whatever was done. Drug intake for diabetes, hypertension, asthma, epilepsy, psychiatric medication and contraception. This is very important. Many times patient husband ले आया, घर का नौकर ले आया, दवा फोन करके मंगा ली, abortifacient and IP. Abortifacient intake is very common. She will not admit in front of husband or in-laws that she has taken an abortifacient, but you have to inquire her in privacy and then only she will admit that I have had for IP or I have had an abortifacient, maybe half dose, and unnecessarily you are thinking, bothering of saving this pregnancy. And emergency contraception, I have noted and it has been well proven that ectopics happening after use of emergency contraceptions are common because emergency contraceptions, except the latest one which has come in form of Rilipristol, all the emergency contraceptions reduce implantation rate by slowing the tubal motility. So, and ectopics are common with patients who have had IP because for all sorts of reasons, our women don't want anything which they have to do repeatedly. They don't want to do anything regarding contraception, so they find IP very convenient. That आज sexual relation हुआ, आज खाली, फिर कल हुआ, कल खाली, and after 3 days they have had, and in a month, for all you know, she has taken some 3 to 4 IPs, and it is one of the biggest cause of ectopic pregnancy. On examination, there is tachycardia, which signifies ectopic or maybe the sepsis, and blood pressure, PIH, sepsis, or maybe she's already in shock, and temperature, sepsis and shock signifies because 2 years back I was just finishing my work at around 6:37 in the morning, and in walks a patient and she was profusely sweating and she was actually having an incomplete abortion and she had bled for last 4 days, and because the abortion was attempted somewhere, so there was a lot of sepsis and the amount of antibiotics and everything that was given to her was humongous, and she spent good 6-7 days in the hospital because of sepsis and an incomplete abortion that was presenting altogether. And please, 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 any patient always auscultate. Yes, for either rhonchi, asthma, maybe they don't tell, but they are asthmatics, and cardiac auscultations. Because with asthma and cardiac, if you give misoprostol later on for an abortion, you will end up in a big mess. So please always auscultate chest and heart of every patient that is coming to you. Bring it in habit. Per abdominal examination, fullness or maybe a local tenderness, maybe it will signify ectopic. Per speculum examination, note amount of bleeding, whether it's scanty or profuse. Color of bleeding, brown, we are dealing with either a missed abortion or a threatened abortion. Red, usually it is incomplete or an inevitable abortion. Mucoid mixed with blood, maybe the abortion has been completed and little bit is remaining. And frank blood-based clause means that now you cannot do anything other than doing a stat TNC. You cannot do it. And smell, that means if there is foul smell, either it was a PID complicating the pregnancy, or it is sepsis. A normal pregnancy complicated by sepsis, PID. And second is because you need an antibiotic along with some sort of luteal support, or sepsis, that means in incomplete abortion, like I said about that case, sepsis. Other pathology like per speculum examination, polyp and ectropion, very common, because polyp, maybe she has had a sexual relation or the polyp has become vascular because of the pregnancy, and there is nothing wrong with the pregnancy. It is actually the polyp that is just bleeding throughout. Ectropion and previous cervicitis, actually when she has sexual relation, she may bleed, but there's nothing wrong with the pregnancy. It's actually these two pathologies that are common. Carcinoma, I have come across 2 patients in my whole this 7, 8, 10, 20, 12 years of practice, where she used to bleed, and the first one I missed actually, and then at 12 weeks I did a pap smear and it was carcinoma, and then I had to refer her for evacuation followed by a hysterectomy, which was very tragic. And so now I don't, if there is a lesion and that is continuously bleeding, I always do a pap smear. Ultrasonography. TVS is actually the gold standard, and you should do a TVS yourself. If you don't have a machine, don't worry. Just look at the film and not the written report. Because many times the film shows something else and report has been reported online or by a sonologist who is not well versed with dealing, and you should be able to read films. Whatever is given to you, the film is clear. And before doing every TVS, you should do an abdominal scan in the same patient. Suppose you are doing TVS, don't put the probe immediately. First do an abdominal scan, ask her to evacuate the bladder, and then put the scope, vaginal probe. And because many times the very early, the uterus position is such that it is very difficult to localize the fundus or the adnexa. So it is, at times it is visible abdominally properly, and then you can manipulate your probe accordingly or just push from below and get the feel. Gentle probe movements have to be very gentle, because as it is, the patient is extremely anxious regarding the outcome of the pregnancy. So if you and that long TVS probe she sees and she's very scared. So you have to keep talking to her, make her at ease, and then liberal use of jelly is very important. The movements in the cervix have to be very slow. Normally, what even I was doing initially before I attended 1 or 2 conferences and learned myself also, that the movement has to be very gentle from vagina to cervix to uterus to fornices, and then view from both the sides. Because normally what we do, we take the inside and then go hit the fundus straight away. No, that is not the case. The viewing of vagina, the cervix, the endocervical canal, internal os is equally important as seeing the gestational sac on the fundus. And also the tenderness has to be noted in probe movements, because maybe we are dealing with a case of ectopic gestation. In vagina, we will look for polyps or clot. Most of the time it is visible. Cervix, you have to see length and width. canal diameter, whether there is funneling. Many times you have very early funneling, whether there are contents in cervical canal and the things above is empty, so maybe you just have to do a simple misoprostol and the whole thing will come out. And whether there is free fluid in POD, amount and nature of free fluid, it is very turbid, we are dealing with blood and it could be an ectopic, or if it is a clear fluid very small in amount, then maybe it is a simple fluid in what is present in POD, or maybe a slight PID that is causing that is coexisting with the pregnancy. And nodular thickening, if you go very gently, can be noted in POD, which signifies actually the endometriotic nodule. And if in good machine, and if you see very gently, there is slight tenderness also while you do it. And because of the pregnancy, the nodule is little visible in a little more better way than the normal pregnancy, but we do miss it. The visualization of gestational sac is important, is must actually, because that's why we are doing an ultrasound for in this patient. The number of sacs, site, whether it is in fundal, because fundal, that means we are dealing with the average normal pregnancy, and now we only have to look for other parameters. This thing, mid cavity means it is already in process of abortion, or it is a threatened pregnancy. Low down, that is just above internal os, you can do some interventions and salvage this. Eccentrically placed sac. Now this is another very important, Cornwall pregnancy. Again, Cornwall pregnancies are on rise, Kersey, I think. Relation of the sac to internal os, again because of all this only, fundal, mid cavity, low down, because we have a rough idea what we are dealing with and how we are to intervene. Shape of the sac, smooth and round, and or crenated. Crenated, if it is, then that means we are for sure it is already missed. And because at times if you see a long standing missed pregnancy, even if the fetal contents are all absorbed, and you see just a clear fluid irregular cavity, that means that it was already, it is a long standing mist. And long standing missed abortions have a tendency to bleed when you do a DNC, and they will not respond to medical management. You have to do a DNC in these patients. There's always a retained product in these kind of patients when you give them abortion kit. We do a medical termination actually. Now there is a pseudo sac versus true gestational sac. There's a DD when you see an empty gestational sac. Pseudo sac is actually seen in ectopics, because the pregnancy is elsewhere and the fluid filled cavity actually gives the shape of a sac. So you at times you may mistake, and that's why I say the panoramic view, the fornices have to be taken, because many times you say okay, intrauterine pregnancy is no problem, but actually we may be dealing with case of ectopic gestation. So pseudo sac is a single echogenic rim surrounding an intrauterine fluid, and can be thick. It can be a thick residual reaction with a slight fluid in it, and it is whereas a true gestational sac has two hyperechoic rings, outer and inner, which is actually decidua vera and capsularis. As gestational sac is very centrally mid cavity location, at times not even fundal, and true gestational sac can be anywhere. It can be little eccentric. It's not that classical mid cavity presentation in a true gestational sac, whereas a pseudo sac will always be a mid cavity sac. It is irregular shape which changes during the scale. Now, suppose you see you are moving, sometimes it will be pear shaped, sometimes it will be round, sometimes it will be oblong, long and oblong, and that is steady and round always. The shape is because it is a gestational sac. There is no vascularity because there is no residual reaction in this kind of pseudo sac, very minimal vascularity, and there is high peripheral flow in a true gestational sac, because obviously the pregnancy changes are happening. And here there is always absence of fetal node or yolk sac, and in a true gestational sac, the fetal node or yolk sac at times is present depending upon the time of gestation we are dealing with. So here is the picture. See the two gestational sac, see the sac and see the position. See, I'll show you. See the position, actually it is almost mid cavity that we are dealing. Okay. And here it is a fundal, almost a fundal placement. almost a fundal and little towards on the sides. And there is a single, this is the two, see here, this and this are the two double echogenic ring. And here it is only one. Here, see here also it is only one. So this is the difference between pseudosac, although both look the same. See, both look the same. Maybe because the period of gestation is different, but both look the same, and there is a slight fetal shadow also coming in, maybe a yolk sac or something. This is very early. And here it is, see, nothing. Nothing is inside. Maybe at times the collection gives a look of a pregnancy, but here the echogenicity of the fetal content is different than this. So both are different. Yolk sac is important. This has to be size, shape and number. If the presence of yolk sac in whatever shape of gestational sac, it confirms an intrauterine pregnancy. You are now, the only problem left with you is that you have to rule out a heterotrophic pregnancy. But if you see a yolk sac, that means there is, whatever the size, that is important, unimportant, but at least it is an intrauterine pregnancy. It is seen as early as 5 weeks on TBS. It should be present at period of gestation 5.5 weeks. I'll come to it later on also. And mean sac diameter of 8 to 10 mm. If mean sac diameter of 8 to 10 mm and size of is more than 6 mm and there is no yolk sac, that means it is already a failed pregnancy. And you have to counsel and terminate. And no need to give progesterone. Waste time in giving progesterone. Or if mean sac diameter is more than equal to 25 mm without yolk sac or fetal pole, it is suspicion of an anembryonic pregnancy. Suppose you are correlating the period of gestation is very early, but this is the size of sac and there is no fetal content, that means it is already an anembryonic pregnancy. Yolk sac is equal to size 2 mm at 8 to 10 weeks of gestation, it is equivalent to failed pregnancy. So these three criteria have to be kept in mind. Fetal node, it is in correlation with period of gestation. You have to see, again correlate with the cycle length previously mentioned by me. The cycle is prolonged, the pregnancy is also delayed, and maybe the period of gestation will vary. That does not mean that it is an abnormal pregnancy or you need to support it. It is a perfectly normal, healthy pregnancy. So again, correlating with period of gestation according to LMP and the cycle length is equally important. It should be seen when mean sac diameter is more than 16 mm on TBS and more than 25 mm on transabdominal scan. Absence of fetal node when mean sac diameter is more than 25 mm indicates a failed pregnancy, and fetal node more than equal to 7 mm without cardiac activity also indicates a failed pregnancy. So when you see a fetal node, when you see a yolk sac, or you don't see anything, you have to always correlate first LMP, cycle length, and then whether these two contents are present. And if these two contents are present, size is correlating, then that means everything is normal. You just have to support the bleeding, somehow see for other causes of bleeding. If not, then you have to look for all these criteria before giving the luteal support. Why waste money in progesterones in these kind of patients? Now look at adenexa is very important. Cardiac activity present or absent. Corpus luteum. If normal corpus luteum is present, at least it is supplying. Many times corpus luteum is not present, and you may have to think of giving some sort of luteal support. Endometriotic cyst, again luteal support, and it is a neurological phenomena, maybe an aspirin. And subchorionic hemorrhage almost always signifies Appler syndrome. So that has to be seen. And many times the subchorionic hemorrhage you can confuse with the normal uterine contractions. So that also has to be differentiated. The pulse that you see at times which you confuse with an subchorionic hemorrhage is not subchorionic hemorrhage. At times it is just simple uterine contractions, because after half an hour if you repeat the scan, it will be a different position of that bulge. So that means we are dealing with maybe a sac of or normal uterine contraction, uterine mobility that you can say. Ectopic pregnancy. Now, the whole purpose of doing scan in bleeding PV is first of all either threatened abortion a missed pregnancy or to rule out an ectopic pregnancy, because this is a real dire medical emergency. Clinical suspicion, because again from history, amenorrhea with bleeding PV plus minus pain abdomen may not be present, vertigo may not be present, nausea may not be present, and IP use. Again, if all this triad is fitting, then you can be assured that 90% of the time this is nothing but ectopic. On examination, maybe if it is in process of rupture or it has formed a pelvic hematocele sort of thing, localized tenderness is there, or maybe if the whole abdomen is rigid, full kind of thing, and per abdominal examination, tenderness or fullness with tender adnexal mass and difficult manipulation of cervix on PV. Beta HCG is raised. Again, don't rely on those cards too much. You have to correlate with serum beta HCG report. That is must. Ultrasonography, until unless it is an emergency, you can always bypass this, because and if you wait for beta HCG report to arrive by the time patient, you will lose the patient. Ultrasonography, adnexal mass may show adnexal mass separate from the ovary with highly vascular rings around it. Like you see on ovulation studies, there's a ring of fire. Maybe similarly that kind of ring, a fire you see on the mass separate from the ovary. Corpus luteum may be present on the same side. Free fluid in POD is present in variable amount. It may be small, maybe very large amount, that the uterus is floating in fluid. There's an empty endometrial cavity or a pseudo sac most of the time, because heterotrophic pregnancy is little uncommon. Now, here are a few pictures I have taken of an extrauterine gestation. See, you can appreciate the amount of free fluid that is there here and here, and here there is a corpus luteum next to ectopic gestation. See, both are in the same plane, same side, because maybe the ovulation has happened and the pregnancy is just stuck here. And this is like the ring of fire. You see typical presentation. And this is the uterus, and this is the ultrasound pictures, this kind of pictures that you will see. Now, cornual interstitial pregnancies, history of MTP in an intrauterine pregnancy. Because patient many times I have got the first case of cornual ectopic that I encountered was, she came with history of an ultrasound picture of showing a sac in the uterine cavity, very much sac, very much viable pregnancies, intrauterine pregnancy, and the DNC has been attempted twice on that patient. So because these cornual pregnancies can go up to certain period of gestation more than the tubal pregnancies. So history of MTP with intrauterine pregnancy. So you have to think whether the pregnancy, the sac is visible, pregnancy is visible, MTP has been attempted twice, and still it is an undisturbed pregnancy. So maybe you are dealing with a cornual or interstitial pregnancy. It is an eccentrically placed sac. Sac is located high on fundus with less than 5 mm of myometrial tissue on both sides. Now this is the only diagnostic sign, myometrial mandate. It will be next to the endometrial cavity, high on the fundus, because naturally the tubal insertion starts from there, and it will be adjacent to the endometrial tip. There is and if you enlarge there, you will see some sort of rim of myometrium, which is called the myometrial mantle. There is an echogenic line from mass to endometrial echo-complex, interstitial line sign, although I have not seen, but I have in 3 patients that I have tackled of cornual pregnancy, all 3 I could very well make out myometrial mantle. See how different. This is an enlarged picture, and it is separate from this thing, and there's a pregnancy is vital. So you can well imagine. 1 to 3 centimeter mass consisting of 2 to 4 mm concentric echogenic rim of tissue surrounding our hypoechoic center. So you can very well appreciate the myometrial mantle. Now there is a timeline that is happening in the series of events. If you follow a normal pregnancy, And if you follow this chart as I have taken, you will never miss a pregnancy or never confuse with POG. 5 weeks of POG, period of gestation, if according to your calculation and the cycle length, it is 5 weeks. A simple GS is visible. There is, you can say, appreciate a slight fetal yolk sac developing. But usually, if you are happy with the intrauterine sac, I think we are dealing with the intrauterine normal pregnancy. The pregnancy is 6 weeks, and yolk sac is visible. Gestational sac is 6 mm diameter, and there is a double bleb side. One bleb is here, one bleb is here. Maybe the fetal node is this, and this is the yolk sac. So if this is there, then 6 weeks pregnancy, cardiac activity may not be present. Don't worry if it is not present here, but maybe if you wait for a week, it will come. Now this is 6.5 weeks, almost a 7 weeks pregnancy. CRL should be 7 weeks pregnancy, 5 mm, 2 poles are visible, flag and caudal. CRL is almost 11 to 16 weeks. 8 to 9 weeks pregnancy, limb buds appear. CRL is 17 to 23 mm roughly. It's a big thing, but okay, no problem. Limb buds have appeared. Cardiac activity always obviously is present. Now 9 to 10 weeks pregnancy, NT is visible. See here. Yes. See, NT starts to appear. Although it is not the right time to measure, but actually the plane is perfect to measure NT. It is in normal position. Perfect. Very nice picture for an NT. I wish the gestation was little more in this so that you can see. Round hypoechoic structure, see here, is visible in fetal brain. It is actually fetal longmencephalon. And CRL is 23 to 32 mm. So these things in a normal pregnancies should happen. Now, treatment, progesterone support, oral dydrogesterone, aspirin, low molecular weight heparin, and the duration of therapy. So I will talk a little bit on progesterone. In my practice, if I have to give progesterone for luteal support, because of further immunologic cause, there is vaginal progesterone, but there is a dydrogesterone till the cardiac activity appears. Because the dydrogesterone has been proven in lot of scientific studies to have immunologic properties also, especially in case of Upla syndrome and all. Vaginal progesterone, I think if you are dealing with micronized progesterone, the only luteal support I give is vaginal progesterone. Pure luteal support is only vaginal progesterone. Aspirin, low molecular weight heparin. Now again, if the pregnancy has happened at this thing, it was producing normally, and you have given progesterone and it has missed. That means it signifies an Upla syndrome, and you have to give, if the patient cannot afford the investigations, then it's better that you give low molecular weight heparin. Or there is bad obstetric outcome in previous pregnancy along with bleeding in this pregnancy, then you have to give low molecular weight heparin in all these patients. Duration of therapy, low molecular weight heparin will go up to 2 days before the expected day of delivery, and aspirin we will stop at 34 weeks. Now, on TVS, now this is again the timeline, and this criteria, I think it's better if you just keep it with you. TVS, on TVS, if mean sac diameter is 25 mm, embryo must be present. If it is not, again a missed pregnancy. As I have said earlier, on TVS, if crown run length of an embryo is 7 mm and cardiac activity must be present. Why I am saying this? Because you see, suppose a patient comes to you, you see a gestational sac, you measure the sac diameter and it is less than say 20 mm. You can give a trial of progesterone support to these patients and wait, so that maybe the pregnancy was deficient and with progesterone, and you have given a progesterone support, and then you can wait. But if you see a measurement in mean sac diameter and it is equal to 25 mm or more, and no embryo is present, then no use. No, don't waste your time. It is already a missed pregnancy. And provided the cycle length is again You have to correlate that also. And suppose the patient comes to you with a as I told you, long-standing missed abortions, the fetal node is absorbed. Then the only mean sac diameter is the only your savior. It will tell you whether you are dealing with missed pregnancy, or maybe you can give a short trial with luteal support. So crown run length in a embryo. Suppose you see an embryo and a fetal node and there is no cardiac activity. Now you see CRL, you take CRL. If CRL crown run length measurement is more than 7 mm and no cardiac activity is present, that means it's already a missed pregnancy. No need to give any interventions other than conserving interventions. You have to terminate this pregnancy. And the previous scan, there was no embryo seen. Now 14 days you wait and still gestation sac is there, no yolk sac, no embryo, again failed pregnancy. Don't give anything else. You have to counsel and terminate. Many times patient will not like it. They said, इन्होंने तो कुछ किया ही नहीं, फीस दी थी, अल्ट्रासाउंड करके बोल दिया कर दो. But that's the only way to do it. You are doing patient good by not giving unnecessary progesterone. TVS on embryo should be seen at there has been a yolk sac, gestation sac, and there is yolk sac. You have given luteal support. You have waited for say 10-11 days and you have not seen an embryo. Don't give any further treatment. It is of no use. Transabdominal scan, many times patient comes with transabdominal scan report and you don't want to waste the money getting a TVS done, or it is not available. It's in the middle of the night, she has come with bleeding. So if the mean sac diameter is 20 mm, then yolk sac should be present. If not, then you have to terminate the pregnancy. And again on this mean sac diameter is 25 mm, then and there is no embryo or a yolk sac, then no point. It is a missed pregnancy we are doing. And so with this, I come to an end of my presentation. Thank you all. After heavy lunch, I think we are all in this kind of mode, and whoever is staying up, my very thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ishita.
I think we are taking the questions later on, or we are just doing it just now.
I think at the end of the session, we will take the questions.
Okay. No problems. Thank you so much.
So, thank you, ma'am, for very elaborative and very good presentation. And I think most of our queries will be solved by now, and whatever is there left behind, we will do it at the end of the session. And now moving to the next topic, I think Dr. Shakuntala ma'am has joined yet or not?
Yes, she has joined. Even Dr. Sulochana is here.
Okay.
I'm Dr. Sulochana and Dr. Shakuntala. I have sent you an unmute request. Please accept it and unmute yourself.
Sulochana ma'am is there from very beginning.
Dr. Shakuntala and Dr. Sulochana, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
First, I would like to welcome our chief guest for the today's program, as Dr. P. Singh ma'am and Dr. Shubha Singh ma'am both has joined now. I welcome you both, and moving for the next topic, which is on first trimester scanning by Dr. Anju Jain ma'am. For this session, the chairpersons are Dr. Shakuntala ma'am. She is a very senior and renowned gynecologist from Jaunpur. Director Kumar Das Seva Ashram Hospital, and ma'am is here now. And Dr. Sulochana ma'am, she is also very senior gynecologist, and she is has been past president of our society also. I welcome you both here, and I request Dr. Shubha ma'am to kindly introduce our speaker, Dr. Anju Jain ma'am. Shubha ma'am is there. Hello.
Ma'am, Dr. Shubha ma'am, I cannot see her name. Dr. Shubha, if you join through any phone or anything, just let me know. drop your name on the chat box, because
No, I
from
think Shubha
Dr.
ma'am is there. I can see her.
Ma'am, which name is it?
Galaxy Note 20.
Just a second. Galaxy Note 20, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think she is not able to unmute herself.
I have done that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Audible now?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am,
Yes.
you're audible.
Okay. I'm really pleased to welcome Dr. Anju Jain over here. She's a director at Jain Hospital, Pandepur, Varanasi. She's a senior gynecologist and she's a gold medalist from Delhi University. She is a renowned laparoscopic and hysteroscopic surgeon. Also, she does colposcopy. She practices infertility and anomaly scan in obstetrics, obviously. Dr. Anju Jain is practicing in Varanasi for last 10 years, and she had worked as senior gynecologist at Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay District Hospital, Varanasi. We welcome Dr. Anju at Jaunpur of Society.
Thank you so much. And I'm so happy to be, I feel like a part of Jaunpur Obs and Gynae Society, and it's a delight speaking to you all. And after a elaborate talk by Dr. Ishita Awasthi, now I'll talk about 11 to 13 week scan. First of all, like it has become our moral responsibility or a duty as an obstetrician to start doing our scans ourselves. It is, believe me, it is not at all difficult. Believe me, even if we have not learned it in our PG periods, it is not so difficult. It can be started at any time. Okay, I started it very late, almost 3-4 years back, and today's my intention would be to sensitize all the people to start by practicing it. If not yet, please start it. Don't think that radiologists have an extra brain to tell us that what is right, what is wrong. We can also do that. So let's start this. So after Dr. Ishita has told us that the first scan when patient comes after missing a period, we are doing it at regularly at 7 to 8 weeks to confirm the viability, to confirm an intrauterine pregnancy. The very next important scan is 11 to 13 weeks, 6-day scan. And what would be the objective of that scan? Besides being acting as an aneuploidy screening scan, which is the most important part of the scan, it gives us the opportunity to do a quick anatomic survey initially to detect major malformations which are very easily detectable at this period of gestation, and we can prevent the pregnancies which are with abnormal fetuses to go beyond 12 weeks till 20 weeks when we are prescribing, when we are advising an anomaly scan to detect those anomalies. Then at the same time, we can use the opportunity to have a risk assessment in this pregnancy for the mother to develop preeclampsia or she is going into preterm labor. How are we going to do this? Will come subsequently. So what are the additional benefit of the scan if the lady doesn't have a scan earlier? This is the first scan which we are doing. We are definitely ruling out an extrauterine pregnancy after, like by confirming that it is an intrauterine fetus. We are dating the pregnancy because we know the accuracy of first trimester scan up till 13 weeks is up to 3 to 5 days. Then obviously whether the fetus is viable or not, and if the pregnancy is multifetal pregnancy, then this is the best opportunity to count the number of fetuses, to comment upon amnionicity and chorionicity, which we will not be able to comment if we miss this period. Then definitely the biometry, which is the most important part to date the pregnancy. We are measuring the CRL, we are doing other, we have to measure PPT, we have to measure head circumference. All of them have importance at this period of gestation. We are measuring long bones, and if we are finding, though it is very difficult to comment upon skeletal dysplasias at this period of gestation, but if all the long bones are very small, we have a suspicion in our mind. We have to follow up this pregnancy. So biometry has an important role at this period of gestation also. Then at the same time, we are seeing the uterus and the adnexa to evaluate them for any malformations, like it is a biconvate uterus, or it is a uterine didelphys, or is there any fibroid in the associated with pregnancy, then we have to be more cautious. Then we are evaluating the adnexa definitely to rule out heterotopic pregnancies, as told by my friend Dr. Ishita. And then the most important part of this pregnancy is aneuploidy screening. And as a part of aneuploidy screening, we are looking at the nuchal translucency. So what is nuchal translucency? We have to answer. Why do we need an NT scan? We should be knowing why are we doing this? And when should we do it? How should we do it? And definitely, if it is abnormal, what next? We can't say that this is abnormal, this is this. We have to explain, we have to counsel the couple. What is, if it is abnormal, what are the options available to her? So what is nuchal translucency? It is the sonographic appearance of a collection of fluid under the skin behind the fetal neck in first trimester of pregnancy. The term translucency is used irrespective of whether it is separated or not, whether it is confined to the neck. When should we do it? We should do it at the CRL of 45 to 84 millimeter. 45 millimeter CRL corresponds to 11 weeks of gestation, and 84 millimeter CRL corresponds to 13 weeks, 6 days of gestation. This is not taken as arbitrarily period of gestation to measure it. There is a reason behind. Why do we take it as 11 weeks as a lower limit? Because we know if we find an abnormal NT, we should have a diagnostic test to confirm why it is abnormal. So any diagnostic test like chorionic villus biopsy, it is not possible before 11 weeks. And if at the same period of gestation, we are using the scan to detect many structural anomalies. And if these anomalies, there are few anomalies which we cannot comment upon before this period of gestation, as like head ossification is not complete before 11 weeks. So we cannot comment that whether this is acrania or this is physiological. Then there is physiological omphalocele, which is present till 10 weeks of gestation. There is physiological herniation of gut in the umbilical cord. So we cannot say this is omphalocele or physiological herniation. Then urine production, it starts by 11 weeks. So we cannot comment renal agenesis before 11 weeks. Why 13 weeks 6 days is taken as upper limit? Because after this, fetus acquires a vertical orientation and we cannot get a sagittal view, so which is needed for nuchal translucency measurement. Then nuchal translucency, like lymphatic drainage, it develops by 13 weeks of 6 days. So which abnormal nuchal translucency, abnormal accumulation of fluid which was there till 13 weeks 6 days, it will get resolved, and which was abnormal will appear normal. So we have to take 13 weeks 6 days as an upper limit. Then if something abnormal we find which is not compatible with life, we have to offer termination of pregnancy. And if we detect it beyond first trimester, then the advantage is lost. So now the question comes, how do we do a nuchal translucency? For that, fetus should be friendly to us. We have to acquire a sagittal view of the fetus. We have to zoom our image. It should be 75% magnified, means the head and the upper thorax occupies most of our screen. It should be in a horizontal neutral position, horizontal and neutral position. What do you mean by neutral position? There is clear fluid between chin and upper thorax. If it is more flexed, just imagine, if the head is more flexed, then the nuchal translucency will increase in size. If it is more extended, just imagine, then this will decrease in size. So it has to be in mid sagittal neutral position with maximum magnification. And then we measure the maximum lucency behind the occipital bone, outer margin of the occipital bone to the inner margin of the skin. And we have to ensure that skin is separate from amnion. If we are not able to see that, we just tap. We just see the fetus moving. We can see the skin separated from amnion. So what is the physiology behind NT? I've just said that since the lymphatic channels are underdeveloped before 14 weeks of gestation, and there is increased resistance in placental circulation. This is the reason behind a normal fluid behind the occipital bone. But later in pregnancy, because the circulation improves, there is improved return going into the venous channels, which drains away the excess fluid, and there is decreased resistance in placental circulation. The nuchal translucency reduces in size. And why there is an abnormal increase in nuchal translucency? In some of the cardiac defects and dysfunction, we see the NT is increased. When there is venous congestion in head and neck, then it is increased. When there is altered composition of extracellular matrix, this is the reason behind increased NT in various aneuploidies, because the extracellular matrix, it contains proteins, and these proteins are encoded in genes, and when there is an abnormal genes, there is abnormal protein presentation present, and this altered composition in extracellular matrix result in increased NT. If there is a failure of lymphatic drainage as seen in cystic hygroma, when there is fetal anemia and hypoproteinemia, there is generalized anasarca, and when there is fetal infection, we see increased NT. So it is not like whenever the NT is increased, the baby is abnormal. No, it is not. We all obstetricians are very fond of giving progesterone in pregnancy, in threatened abortions, in high-risk pregnancies, and there have been studies that progesterone therapy increases nuchal translucency in women with threatened miscarriage. So, concluding that oral progesterone therapy may increase nuchal translucency depending upon the treatment duration without causing abnormal prenatal screening test results. So this makes us think that every abnormal NT doesn't mean that fetus is aneuploidy. Another study, observational study published in American Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology, again concluded that exogenous progesterone increases nuchal translucency. Then there has been an association between unexplained thickened nuchal translucency and adverse pregnancy outcome, as published in Journal of Archaeology Obstetrics 2018, which concluded that there had been a significantly increased risk of abortions, IUGRs, preterm births, low birth weights, and preeclampsia. It means that if we found an NT which is beyond 95th centile for that period of gestation, we have to follow these babies so that like closely to rule out IUGRs, or if these babies are developing low birth weight or the mothers are developing symptoms of preeclampsias. Then there had been a study, prospective cohort study of fetal nuchal translucency in first trimester in pregnancy outcome. This again showed the healthy survival rate in fetuses with isolated NT was 91%. NT like 91.9% means was significantly higher than those with structural abnormality, thereby meaning that fetuses which have isolated NT, means no other structural abnormalities, these fetuses have good survival rate. Then the pediatric outcome of the fetuses who had detected increased NT with normal karyotype, it also showed that there had been a 63% intact survival. Long-term neurodevelopment outcome among survivors did not appear to differ from that reported for general population. The gist of all these studies, I wanted to say that increased NT, we should not like get hyper and advise the mother like go for MTP. No. Properly evaluate the pregnancy. Maybe we are saving so many babies. Instead of just advising them go for MTP, no, evaluate these mothers. So increased NT is common in trisomy 21, trisomy 18, 13. They have other various markers in ultrasound. Turner syndrome, congenital heart defects, skeletal dysplasias, various syndromes like Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome, DeGeorge syndrome. So once we have seen it is increased NT. First, please understand there is no definite cutoff. We say more than 3 millimeter, no. It has to be correlated with period of gestation with the CRL. Any NT If it is 2 at 11 millimeter of gestation, definitely it is abnormal. So we have to correlate with the CRL, and once we find it is increased, we should know what are we going to advise that mother or that couple. For that, we should know about the history of the mother, her pedigree chart, any history of any aneuploidies, congenital malformation, any single gene defect. If we could elicit, then we have to tell her what are the choices available to her for diagnosing. Should she go for an invasive test like a chorionic villus biopsy, or should we advise her a combined test like dual marker along with an ultrasound NT to give her a risk factor, whether she's high risk for Down syndrome, Turner syndrome, or trisomy 13 or 18, or should we advise her an NIPS? But NIPS, non-invasive prenatal screening, but it is again a screening test, very expensive, somewhere around costing 18,000. If the couple can afford it, we have to give her a risk benefit of NIPS over invasive. Though NIPS is a screening test with 99% accuracy for Down syndrome, invasive test is a 100% accurate diagnostic test. It is definitely much better, but there is a chance of losing a pregnancy. There's a chance of abortion, very low in very expert hands. That has to be told to the couple. Or should, if they opt to do nothing, then their choice. So the role of judicious counseling and advice is there, and then definitely follow up. We have to follow up these pregnancies. So we are after detecting the NT, after measuring the NT, our ultrasound should not stop here. We should evaluate the nasal bone because it acts as an independent variable. Presence of nasal bone reduces the aneuploidy risk by 3 times. And absent of nasal bone, after 12 weeks, that means CRL of 65, it increases the risk of aneuploidy. And absence occurs in 67 to 73% of trisomy 21, increasing the likelihood ratio by 4.8 times. And but we should not forget that absent nasal bone is normal, and it can occur in 1.5% of normal euploid populations. So how do we say the nasal bone is absent? We have to look for the nasal tip. Then we see the 2 equal sign. The upper less hyperechoic margin, which is the skin, the lower hyperechoic margin, the nasal bone. Now, some people measure the nasal bone, but ISWAG and FMF, they don't say that we have to measure the nasal bone. We can very well comment upon whether it is absent or present. Then we have to put a color Doppler in the true mid-sagittal view itself, and we see for the ductus venosus flow. Ductus venosus flow, the umbilical vein, where when it joins the IVC, the most aliasing part we see is the ductus venosus. We put our Doppler gauge here, minimum Doppler gauge 0.7 mm or 1 millimeter, and we measure the pulsatility index or the PI value. And it has an A and E wave, S and D, and A wave. A positive A wave, it should be there in all fetuses, and a negative A wave means a wave below the baseline, or if we are seeing the inverted image, a wave above the baseline. If it is present an absent A wave or a reversed A wave, it is an indicator that we should evaluate these babies for cardiac defects, for skeletal dysplasias, and this is an independent high risk factor for trisomy 21. And if now people do recommend that increase pulsatility index more than 95% or more than 1.5 MOM, again it's an independent risk factor for all these anomalies. Then we look for the tricuspid flow. Either we see the color flow by color, or we measure the tricuspid flow, and any regurgitation more than 60 centimeter per second, more than half of the cycle, it is an independent risk factor for, it is a soft marker for Down syndrome. Why do we take 60 centimeter per second? Because less than 60 centimeter may be present in normal individuals also. So we are measuring this reversed, the line below the line, the reversed flow. If it is more than 60, then it is abnormal. Then fetal heart rate, we are seeing it to confirm the viability. In normal pregnancy, it increases from 110 per beats per minute at 5 weeks to 170 beats per minute at 10 weeks, and gradually it decreases to 150 beats per minute by 14 weeks. And it is very good marker in trisomy 13 because there is marked tachycardia and is above 95th centile in 85% of fetuses. And there is a mild bradycardia which and is below 5th centile in 15% of the cases of trisomy 18. Whereas there is a mild tachycardia in trisomy 21 and is above 95th centile in 15% of the cases. No. I would just try to demonstrate few correct and incorrect images. Like this is a true mid-sagittal plane with head in neutral position. How do we say that this is a true mid-sagittal plane? Very simple. We are seeing this nasal tip. We are seeing the nasal bones. This is the palate. This is the chin. There is no hyperechoic area between this nasal bone and the palate. There is no zygoma. If we are seeing the zygoma, then the head is slightly rotated. Then it is not a mid-sagittal image. Then we are seeing three translucent areas. This is the midbrain. This is intracranial translucency. This is cisterna magna. These are all very important. And this is the curtain-like area we are seeing is cavum septum pellucidum. Now look at this image. एक झटके से लगेगा ये भी normal है, but no, this is not normal. We are seeing palate, we are seeing chin, we are seeing the nasal bone, but the nasal tip is missing. So it means there is some rotation somewhere. Okay. Now look at this image. Again, we are seeing the nasal tip, nasal bone, palate, chin, but I told you there should not be any hyperechoic area in between, but we are seeing a zygoma. So again, an incorrect plane. Okay, I hope I have been clear in explaining this point. Now, utilize this first trimester scan, like if to view the head face in okay, we will see the nasal bone as two nasal tips. We are seeing a triangle like this, and we are seeing the mandible as two dots with a gap in between. This is a very important view. We can comment upon a retrognathia in this view. If there is a single dot, if the two dots are fused, the chin is pushed behind, we can comment upon that. If there is a gap between the lower border of this triangle, then there is a possibility of cleft palate. So always try to visualize the face in coronal view. So now coming to the utilizing this opportunity to comment upon if there are major anomalies or not. Always try to assess the fetus, whatever try to assess because there are few anomalies which can be always be detectable, and we should not be missing all these anomalies in first trimester. I will explain you in just 1 or 2 slides, like acrania absent of fetal head, encephalocele, alobar holoprosencephaly, exomphalos, gastroschiasis, megacystis, body stalk anomalies, and missing limbs. And there are few anomalies which we cannot detect. So we are not going to like waste our time trying to detect all these anomalies, because because some of the features, they are not being developed at 12 weeks. Microcephaly we cannot comment upon. Agenesis of corpus callosum we cannot comment upon, because corpus callosum development will be completed by 18 weeks. Semilobar holoprosencephaly, we are not able to comment upon. We cannot diagnose this. And cerebellar abnormalities we cannot detect, because cerebellar development will complete by 18 to 20 weeks. CCAM, pulmonary sequestrations, bowel obstruction, severe hydronephrosis, no, we cannot detect. Sometimes detectable anomalies, By improving upon our ultrasound skills, we can convert these anomalies sometimes into this. But right now it is not that easy. Diaphragmatic hernia, only if we are seeing fetal heart and stomach in a true axial plane at the same level, then only we can say, but it is not very easy in first trimester. Lethal skeletal dysplasia, as I told you, we should try get into a habit of measuring all the long bones. If they are less than 3 percentile for that period of gestation, yes, it is a lethal skeletal dysplasia. But generally skeletal dysplasias, they are not detected before 26 weeks of gestation. Isolated bone shortening, isolated limb absent. If we are in a habit of seeing all the 4 limbs during first trimester, like if we can see, because baby is in a very friendly position, the limbs are in extended position, so we can see all the 3 segments of all the 4 limbs. We can count the fingers, we can count the toes, because fingers hand is not in the fist form, it is open. We can comment, but once we are seeing, then only we can comment upon facial clefts. I told you, try to see coronal view of the face. Then open spina bifida, yes, there this NT scan will give you so many clues that there is a chance of this fetus having an open spina bifida. What eyes will see, what mind knows. I will tell you a few slides. Just try to, next day, tomorrow or Monday, you are doing a scan, just try to see them. Look, we have to take this image to measure a CRL for the NT scan. See how many things you can detect at this image only. Just don't look at the NT, look at the fetus whole. Absent nasal bone, we can comment. I told you cavum, septum, pellucidum we are seeing. I told you that we are seeing 3 translucent areas. Huh? What is this? This is thalamus, this is midbrain, huh? This is intracranial translucency or the future cisterna, fourth ventricle, and this is cisterna magna. And this is palate. If there is a gap in this palate, soft palate, there is cleft palate. Okay, one can say that we are seeing just one side palate. No, if you see, try to manipulate, you can see the other palate also. Then we are seeing the chin. If we are in a habit of seeing the measuring the facial angles, we can comment upon retrognathia also. And by just overlooking the facial face profile, if the chin is pushed behind, we can see that they can be retrognathias. And if usually if you see there is a hypothalamus, this is thalamus and midbrain, there is a constriction here. And generally if we draw a line through the this palate, this constriction should be above that line. If it is pushed below, if this constriction is pushed below and there is shortening of this intracranial translucency, then this is an indirect indicator for open spina bifida. We are not directly seeing the spine, but if we are seeing these indirect signs, then we should try to evaluate the fetus in fetus spine. If not possible at this point, call her after 10 days, call her after 2 weeks, then try to evaluate the spine. Then cord insertion we are seeing. If there is a gut herniating into the cord, we can comment upon omphalocele if it is covering over by a skin, and gastroschiasis if the gut is freely mobile in the amniotic fluid. Then here we are seeing the bladder. If there is a huge like cystic area here at the place of bladder, we measured it longitudinally. Normally it should be less than 7 millimeter. If it is more than 7 millimeter, then it is megacystis. Then we should evaluate. So many things we can get from this single image only. So look at this. I told you acrania we can comment upon, encephalocele we can comment upon, lobar oval holoprosencephaly, because if there is no cavum, septum, pellucidum, we are seeing iniencephaly if the head is in constant extended position, which we say a stargaze appearance. Then these this is iniencephaly. Megacystis we can comment upon, limb reduction defects, not in this view, but like if we are seeing if we are not seeing any limb, if the limb is missing, body stock anomaly, the normal contour of the fetus is lost. So for assessing, doing a anatomical assessment at 11 to 13 weeks, we should not go in a haphazard way. We should follow a guideline, whatever guideline you want to follow, FMF guideline, ISWA guideline, Canadian guideline. Just stick a guideline in your ultrasound room and try to follow that. Like, I'll just demonstrate you, just for a reading sake, we have to, from head to toe examination, we have should see head, neck, face, spine, chest, heart, abdomen, abdominal wall, extremities, placenta, and cord. I'll show you, demonstrate you with the images. Just see the head. We are in a habit of seeing the head with two butterfly, like just a butterfly appearance. We are very happy. Yes, we should be happy because we are ruling out alobar holoprosencephaly. We are ruling out acrania, anencephaly, but there is much more beyond to this. We should see head. We should try to evaluate head in 4 eggshell planes. Like this oval shape of the head, we are seeing complete skull bones. We have seen falx cerebri. This is the falx cerebri, complete separation of the two choroid plexuses. Okay, we are seeing which is filling 3/4 of the lateral ventricle at this period of gestation. Okay, now we should try to see for the third ventricle. Slight once we have seen the butterfly appearance, slightly going caudally, we are seeing the third ventricle appearing between the two thalamus. Always try to see that. Yes, believe me, it is not difficult. Then we, while assessing this, we have assessed the thalamus also. Then we have to look for the aqueduct of Sylvius. How do we see the aqueduct of Sylvius? Further behind caudally, if we are going, these are the thalamus. These are the cerebral peduncles, and this is the aqueduct of Sylvius in between. Okay. At this again, try to see the position. Just be with me. See the position of thalamus and cerebral peduncle. They are converging like this towards the occiput. Can you appreciate this? This is the thalamus, this is the thalamus, this is the cerebral peduncle. If we draw an imaginary line, it is like going like this. It is going like this towards the occiput. Okay, and this is the aqueduct of Sylvius, and there is a definite difference space between the posterior wall of aqueduct of Sylvius to the occipital bone. If this aqueduct of Sylvius is pulled behind towards the occiput, again there is a possibility of open spina bifida. So many like information we can gather from this. Then again, slight caudally, if we are going, we are seeing the fourth ventricle, we are seeing the cisterna magna. This is the sagittal image converted into the axial image. And again, we are seeing the cortex, very thin cortex. At this period of time, gestation, a very thin cortex. Okay. I hope I have been clear. Then I told you evaluation of spine by raising suspicion. Some indirect signs in mid-sagittal planes, that means there is obliteration of intracranial translucency, and there is an alteration of brainstem to brainstem occipital bone ratio. What is this? Very simple. We have seen the brainstem, posterior border of the midbrain. We measure a line drawn from brainstem to the occipital bone. So this will be brainstem occipital bone ratio. And if what is brainstem? This line, this is brainstem. Just imagine if the brainstem is this is increased and this is decreased, the ratio will be increased. This is an indirect sign for open spina bifida. Now, coming to the thorax and abdomen, we should take a true axial plane of the abdomen. How do we say it is a true axial plane? We should be seeing a single rib on both sides. Then a stomach bubble. We measure this and abdominal circumference. Okay. And similarly, a true axial plane for the thorax, single rib on each side. We are seeing the 4 chambers. Left ventricle, left atria, left ventricle, right atria, right ventricle. How do you say that this is a left atria? There is Aorta is always behind the left atria. We should evaluate, we should see this. There is a anechoic round area, round vessel behind the left atria. So this is left atria, left ventricle, right atria, right ventricle. Tricuspid valve is ahead of mitral valve. It is more apical. So chamber identification is easy. Put your color, see two inflows. Two inflows should be in same color, and like it is red, there is no blue, there is no mixing of blood blue. So we can easily say there is no tricuspid regurgitation, no need of measuring TR. You can very well comment that there is no TR. If there is an equal inflow, very easily you can say that chambers are proportionate. There is no disproportion. Then we are moving cranially. We are coming to the three vessel trachea view, three vessel view. It is not easy to identify all the three: pulmonary artery, aorta, and superior vena cava in their routine arrangement as we see in second trimester. But when we put a color, we see a V. We definitely see a V in same color. If we are seeing a V, we are assured that two outflows are normal. If we see a single vessel, then there is a problem. Then it could be TGA, it could be aortic stenosis, it could be coarctation. So we have to call this female. After 15 days, we have to do an early echo. So this would be a screening for cardiac. Okay. Now, this is measurement of abdominal circumference I told you. Then again, we are seeing the cord insertion. If we are seeing the cord insertion, we are ruling out omphalocele, we are ruling out gastroschiasis. Then caudally, if we are coming, we are seeing the bladder. Put a color, you see two vessels going on either side of bladder. Again, we can say that there are two umbilical arteries. So we have ruled out single umbilical artery. So it is not difficult. Just get into a habit of seeing those things. Then now evaluate the limbs. All the four limbs can be evaluated. See how easy it is to count the fingers. You can even see the digits also. See the lower limb, femur, tibia, fibula, and like this ankle and this. We can say comment upon club foot. We should not be seeing the foot and the lower limb in the same plane. Okay, it should be at 90 degrees always. Then we should see the foot in this plane also, counting the toes. So we can rule out missing limb. We can rule out polydactyly, because if we are finding the polydactyly in first trimester, and if we are seeing encephalocele, then we have to look for the fetal kidneys. It could be an indicator of Meckel-Gruber syndrome. Thank you. I hope I have been very clear, or if there is a question, please don't hesitate to ask me. I would love to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anju ma'am. It was such a wonderful presentation. I would request our chairpersons if they want to comment on this presentation. Our chairperson, Sulochana ma'am and Shakuntala ma'am. Anybody has questions to Dr. Ishita ma'am and Dr.
And
Anju
Dr.
ma'am?
Sulochana is not there, I guess. I cannot see her name again. Dr. Shakuntala, I have sent you and request to unmute. Please unmute yourself.
I think we cannot hear her. Okay, till we can hear Dr. Shakuntala ma'am, I have few questions for Dr. Ishita. First of all, I'd like to thank you for such a elaborate coverage of this important, very important practical topic. One of very practical question we encounter in our patients. Some patients we put on enoxaparin and ecosprin, and they come with bleeding, threatened abortion. So should we stop it or should you continue it?
Please
Enoxaparin and
unmute me.
ecosprin.
Unmute me.
Yeah, we can hear you, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Actually, if they are coming with after enoxaparin and this thing, if they are coming, I think you should continue, because the very reason why you have given that aspirin and this thing, there has to be a solid reason. You are not giving it empirically. So, if there is a you have to rule out the causes of other causes of bleeding. There is no reason you're giving it for subchorionic hemorrhage, you're giving it for other reason, some solid reason, maybe a PIH remote from term in previous pregnancy. So there's no reason why you should. You have to look for other causes of bleeding also. Like I mentioned earlier, maybe a polyp, an ectropy, or maybe it's a simple postcoital bleed that you have to see.
So we should not even temporarily suspend them.
No, I never did. In fact, if my patient is on aspirin and she bleeds in spite of progesterone and aspirin, I put her on low molecular weight heparin. I don't, because you have to rule out if the patient has been there before you and diagnosed case of Apla syndrome, you have to give it. You have to give it. Otherwise, you will have a bad obstetric outcome. I don't do it. Dr. Anju, what do you do?
Actually, yes. If she is on anticoagulants, there is no point stopping anticoagulants. We are giving for a reason, and we stop it. The benefit goes. We have to continue.
Don't
My
stop.
second question is in patients with previous abortions or even threatened abortion in this pregnancy, is there any role of serum progesterone levels?
No, I don't. I have never done a serum progesterone ever. Not even in, because serum progesterone, it's a pulsatile hormone. Today it's something else, like prolactin. Today it's something else. Tomorrow it will be something else. So maybe you're getting a normal report and there is a luteal support. And progesterone levels you have to assess at the level of endometrium, which is an impossible situation. So it doesn't matter.
Thank you, ma'am. And one more question, what is the role of karyotyping of product of conception? Actually,
Yes,
I have done in very few cases, but never find any benefit in doing it.
Actually,
so
it is
I'm always
karyotyping. I have also not done karyotyping, product of conception, but you have, see, there is a lot of things, there's a gray zone. Huh? See, suppose patient is with you, you have given her everything and she has aborted. You have to give her some answers. कुछ तो करना है ना. Secondly, and karyotyping of parents, if she is a case of 3 RPNs, that is important. Or maybe husband semen analysis, that is more important than karyotyping of abortus. Because maybe it is a de novo thing, maybe it is the whatever problems are happening, that is limited to that pregnancy only. That is why they say that it is not repetitive. That is why maybe so many people without any intervention have a normal pregnancy after an abortion. Or maybe after 2. You must have noticed in your practice only. She has been elsewhere, she is not done anything. Last minute आपके पास आई पता चला उसके 2 abortions थे. ना इस बार PIH है ना कुछ.
I would like to add on something like we, as an obstetrician, we should know that karyotyping will tell us the numerical defects only, and most of these females, most of these abortus, they have translocations, deletions, inversions, or there is a family history. So we should know what are we going to ask the test for.
In fact, one thing is there. In fact, one thing I will definitely, suppose there is a abnormal fetus. Suppose we are delivering a fetus at 20-22 weeks with an abnormal, some sort of abnormalities. Like Dr. Anju, we were part of that conference also, and we conducted that whole session. Dr. Praveen from Pune.
Ispat.
Yes, Ispat. So he said something very good. He said if the patient is having multiple anomalies, then there is a single gene defect. And if the patient is having isolated anomalies, suppose you see you at 20-22 weeks, you've done a scan and patient has come with a lot of anomalies, you have aborted. So there actually, if you send a part of skin under in the axilla for karyotyping, that is more important than getting a karyotyping done at that abortus. But again, as you say, there are a lot of practical things. If you don't do, they will go to some other doctor in Bombay, Chennai, wherever, and they say, "अरे उसका तो वो नहीं किया, फलाने का हुआ था, तुम्हारा नहीं हुआ." So that is a fix. So you have to see the patient, frankly. But better is that if you are aborting at a baby of multiple congenital anomaly, that is, they are the candidate. Collect the cord blood and send it for karyotyping. Or send a skin sample. Take a photograph. That is more important than this.
Abhina, next maybe on 19th we are conducting a webinar on what genetic information an obstetrician should know, when and why and how. If you all are interested, I will send the link to. Give me one number, I will send, and you can have most of the queries. Like हमें मालूम भी तो होना चाहिए हमें कौन सा टेस्ट एडवाइस करना है,
क्या करना है, how to send. How to send. That is also very important.
If you all are interested, I will send the link.
तुम्हें कैसे हो,
Yes.
ये सारी चीजें दिखाई देंगी उसमें, फटाफटा पहनो सब.
And what basically we are talking about detecting anomalies, but first and foremost important thing is preconceptional counseling, adding a folic acid, preferably an L-methyl folate, to all the pregnant ladies so that we avoid these neural tube defects, open spina bifida. Okay, aneuploidies we may not avoid, but all these anomalies we can avoid by adding on simple folic acid.
And second thing is that suppose you have that patient has come to you, she's a missed abortion, and then she has a DNC with you. Don't leave her just like that. Tell her that maybe next you may have this again. So it's better that you come to me pre-conceptional phase.
Yes.
You have to tell her this. बाद में वो करे ना करे, that's a different story. But you have to send this that no, this इन सब चीजों का treatment starts before the pregnancy, because most of the time they'll end up with bleeding. Most 50% of the time you can salvage, 50% of the time you cannot. So you have to tell them that no, you have to give something before that also. Especially in RPL, if they have been with me, most of my RPLs conceive on aspirin and progesterone. I tell them when to conceive, and I tell them that I give them aspirin and progesterone before. Actually, so ecosprin has to be there in that periconceptional phase to prevent that implantation failure and implantation problems.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks to both of you. And now I request Dr. Anju, ma'am, to give a vote of thanks.
Just a minute. I would like to thank you all people to conduct such a good webinar with. I don't know how much I've been and Dr. Ishita have been so clear about our topics, but we thoroughly enjoyed this. And I would like to thank Acumentis, Pankaj Sahuji for conducting this webinar.
At least he has been pushing me. I know my case. I am basically a very lazy person, and he and Anju combined have been pestering me. Kuch kar lete. So now I hope if that pestering continues and I do something else. So,
and their folic acid is also good. It's not bad. Online BOH is good product.
Yeah. So that's what we are doing. That most of the time we are hopefully this will continue. We'll come up with some other topic one of the days, and maybe your society will invite us again a practical topic, because for me reading books again is a big problem, because today whatever I have spoken, this is all what I do. I have not consulted a single book today for making my presentation. Believe me, you'll think it's a big joke, but actually it is true. I have done only, yes, I have taken few images and all, but yeah, I'm not consulted anymore.
But Ishita ma'am, I think it is always a treat to hear you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Jaunpur once.
Yeah, for Mirena and endometriosis.
AUB.
Jaunpur is always family.
You shared.
It's always a family place. I have a lot of loving people there, including you and uncle. So I'm always ready to come whenever I'm invited. Courtesy, hopefully the corona is over.
And you're always welcome.
Yes.
Yes, welcome, ma'am.
Always. Thank you so much.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. Yes.
Both the topic was very excellent. And I thank from all on behalf of JOGS, I would like to thank both speakers, Dr. Anju ma'am and Dr. Ishita Avasti ma'am. And it was a very informative session, and every part was covered very interestingly. And I would also like to thank all JOGS members and all respected my chairperson, Dr. Shaili, Dr. Sulochana ma'am, Dr. Shubha Singh ma'am, Dr. Shakuntala ma'am. And also I would like to thank Pankaj Sahu ji and its Acumentis team who collect at this platform. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank
to
you so
everyone.
much. Yes.
Hello.
Hello. Can we unmute? Can we
I
mute?
think we can leave now.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
To all doctors for giving us time, to giving us space. Thank you from bottom of our heart. Thank you so very much, doctors. Thank you. Now you can leave.
Thank you.